We are now streaming. Chair Wilton.
Oh, we're ready to party? Good afternoon. Microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas Welton, and I am the chairman of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. Welcome to our April, what day is it? 9th? April 9th, 2024 meeting. Yeah, post-eclipse. We are all still here, and that is that's magnificent. Your brain might have gotten raptured, but maybe you did not. The Planning Commission work sessions are being held in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center at 600 East 4th Street. We are in room 280 today. So if you're wandering around the halls, you can come on down. That's where we are. For viewing by the public and the media, today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. We will begin our meeting with introductions, and I'm going to go to my left and begin with Commissioner Wilden.
Rebecca Wilden, Planning Commission. Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Robin Stewart, Planning Commission.
Rick Winiker, Planning Commission.
Planning Commission.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Commission.
Erin Shaw, Planning Commission.
Terry Lansdale, Planning Commission.
Laura Harmon, Planning Staff.
Allison Craig, Planning Director.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
Al Knight, Planning Staff.
All right. We don't have anybody online today. or anything.
We do. Yes. Dave. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
So this is one of our presenters.
You're on mute.
All right.
I think he said that.
I'll go with that. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. I also would like to introduce, we have some special guests. Again, last month I had invited some guests to come to our meeting because we have nominations and or positions available on the Planning Commission. So joining us today are Melissa Oliver, Pat Finn, Carolyn Millen, did I say that right? And Milton Silver. All right, and so I would like to ask all the commissioners to please at least say hi to these folks and give them the Planning Commission welcome that we all deserve. Let's get our meeting started by taking a look at the minutes. Do I hear a disposition for the minutes of our meeting from March 11th?
Wilden, motion to approve.
It's been moved by Wilden and seconded by Russell. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? That being done, we have gotten our minutes approved, and we'll go on to some quick new business. And let me pull my notes out so I can actually say what I think I'm supposed to say at this point. Doop, 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 doop. There we go. Handwritten notes, everybody, feel the love. It is April, and this is the time that we put together a nominating committee for the 2024-2025 officers. And we've put together a committee, and that committee consists of Erin Shaw, Teresa McDonald, and Robin Stewart. And those three folks will be responsible for getting us nominations for chairman and vice chairman for 2024-2025. If you are interested in doing one of those things, you will need to get an email of interest to these folks before May 3rd, which is Becca's birthday. And we all know this now, apparently. No filter whatsoever, is there? But for those of you who won't be celebrating Becca's birthday, get your oh yeah, you're right. Who's not celebrating that one? We just need to get your indications of what you'd like to do and how you'd like to serve. The committee is formed from, I think it is, and I cannot remember the section of our rules of procedure. It's like one paragraph long. And I will be copying that and sending that around to the committee members. Your task is not that hard, so we'll be able to get that done. And also, I'd like to just take this time to say If you are interested in being a member of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, check both the city and the county's websites under advisory boards. I know that the city is currently taking applications for the positions they'll be appointing, and those applications are due by the end of May. But the city and the county have separate advisory board procedures. So make sure you check them both because they are what they are. And if you're hearing this out there in Radio Land, that was what we would say when it was like the 70s or something. In Radio Land. The interweb, that would be it. If you're interested and you have questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be glad to answer any questions. And we will invite you to one of our meetings. It'll be fun. On to our next piece of business, and that's an update on the UDO text amendment from Allison Craig and Laura Harmon. This is the part where we vamp because the technology is so great that it's kind of arriving almost like the aliens in the three body problem. Now that would be improper, right?
It's your favorite part of the meeting.
Yeah, this is where are we cooking with gas now?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about residential development in the UDO. And the first thing that I just want to acknowledge and talk about here for a minute is why we're here, because I feel like there's probably a number of you that are asking that question right now. Why are we talking about this? I think that the planning department is really fortunate to have a body like the Planning Commission that over the years has been very strongly and actively supportive of the work that we're doing. You know, all of the things that we're doing, and when you're trying to adopt the first comprehensive plan in 45 years and completely overhauling your zoning ordinance. I mean, those are huge steps that can have a lot of political strife that we've all experienced over the last few years. And I just want to say first and foremost, thank you to you all, because I think that you have been very strong supporters in the work that we've been doing and what we're trying to accomplish. So I want to put that on the table. And so the fact that we're talking about this is not a reactionary sort of thing. It of course came directly referred to us by a city council. So when city council refers something to committee and to staff, I mean, that is a directive for us to take a closer look at something. And so we've been looking at residential development for really almost a year now. I think that's actually supposed to be May 22nd. Now that I'm looking at that, apologies. So about a year. And what we've done is we've really been taking our time. I think council wanted an immediate sort of response to that, but we wanted to really be very thoughtful and considerate of the work that had been done in the past leading up to where we were. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about just market conditions, what we've been looking at in terms of what we've seen, where we think things are going. We've done a real deep dive. You know, we've been talking to the different Pure Cities for quite some time, but did a little deeper dive now that we've kind of got our feet wet with some of this. And then really just an internal evaluation of are we where we want to be in terms of what we're getting. And that has resulted in 3 proposed changes that I will talk through, and then I'll end with kind of where we're going. So the referral was really about asking staff to look at alternative options for changes to the UDO for allowing duplexes and triplexes and larger projects developing by right. And so questioning, like in this picture right here, this is a new subdivision of only duplexes. And is this what we were aspiring to when we adopted the UDO and adopted the comprehensive plan? And I think that's still up for conversation, which is what really staff was looking at, is that, yes, there's housing supply here, but I don't see the tree-lined streets that are part of all of the conversations that we've had and all the policies in the adopted comprehensive plan. There's some things missing here, and that's what we've been really thinking about. So when we talk to city council about the referral specifically, we've tended to focus on 3 areas. looking at the quality of the development, the quantity of units. So it's like, how many units are we getting? What's the density? And where are we getting the density and where are we getting our housing supply? And when we talked through this between a couple different meetings with city council, we talked about development standards, and we've kind of alluded to that in February, that we had some concerns about some of the quality of developments that we were seeing that are coming in through site plan. We talked about potentially requiring a mix of housing. So we've kind of went through some different scenarios with that, and really kind of came to the conclusion that is just trying to get into a percentage of different types was just way more prescriptive than I think was necessary. And frankly, it's just, I think that's a business model that a developer might have that we just don't need to get in the middle of. But then there's also a locational criteria, and I think this has been really important. It's about making sure that we're matching our housing supply with where we're prioritizing infrastructure, where we need growth the most, and making sure that those are aligned. So I'm going to start with market conditions. And I want to mention that over the last year, we've hired 2 different consultants, one that really kind of did a deep dive for us in terms of townhomes and plex units and, what we're likely to see going forward. And also we hired a separate consultant to do some site testing for us. And so we've had some other people kind of in the mix helping us evaluate some of these things. And so, in a couple of these slides, if you've been paying attention to city council, you may have seen before, but the first thing that we haven't seen is a lot of new infill duplexes and triplex. And this is not different than other cities that have implemented this kind of zoning reform. I think there's been things in the news with Minneapolis that I think over 3 years, they've only seen like 72 triplexes. And I'll get to why that is. So there's not a lot of new projects or new buildings coming in. We've been seeing over the last couple of years a huge boom in apartment construction. There are tons of cranes out there right now, rapidly working on building apartment towers, but there's nothing coming in behind it. Like, that's the financing has dried up. There's not good equity for big projects. And so what we're really seeing, and when you're looking at your rezoning requests lately, has been tons and tons of townhomes. Like, that's where the activity is right now. That's where the money is. And it presents an opportunity for home ownership that we haven't really had before, and certainly isn't being provided with the apartments that we're building right now. And then most of what we're seeing in terms of larger development, so a subdivision, so a new subdivision, a new residential development, they are pretty much all duplexes and triplexes. And what they are using is this conservation development option that allows you to deviate from the base standards. And when we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. I wanted to talk a little bit about market trends from 2018 to 2023. Not surprising, you've seen a decline in the number of single-family detached products. So you can see that in the bottom dark blue color there, that really not getting, it's just the numbers and the economics aren't working for that. Of course, you see the huge boom in multifamily development, which is not surprising given what we've seen in rezoning and just where the activity has been. And I think the opportunity is that we've had a strong increase in the number of townhomes, and that's really been coming through largely through the rezoning process, and an area of opportunity that we've been focusing on that I don't think that we have enough land allocated for by right development of townhomes today. We also see there's a really small number of the sort of duplex to triplexes for 2023. And even though about mid-year of 2023 is when we started allowing those by right, still not getting a ton of those. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. It's trying to understand what the new code requirements are. I think we put some standards on how you build them that may be making them challenging to build. And so like that's the number that I'm looking at, particularly on the duplex side, because when we actually go and look at the entire like a fiscal year from 23 to 2024, where we are right now, you're probably more in like the 140s for duplexes and about 20 or so for triplexes. So still not a ton of activity there. And I think that that's something that we've been also evaluating as well, is what do we need to do differently? I want to talk about peer cities because we are not the first city that has implemented zoning reform. And I think it's really important to talk through what they've accomplished, where they've had challenges. I'm fortunate to be involved in a group called the Big City Planning Directors Institute, where once or twice a year, we all get together and we kind of talk through, hey, what are you seeing? What are your challenges? And so it's an opportunity to also get, what's not on the website, like kind of like, hey, what are you seeing on the ground? And so we, looking at some of these peer cities, and I'm going to highlight Austin and Minneapolis because Minneapolis has had these reforms in place longer than we have. Austin is very new. It came about actually in December of last year. And you can see some patterns here. I think there's been a lot of news press recently about Austin and have they overbuilt apartments. And it's interesting to see that they have about twice the number of apartments construction that we've had over the last 5 to 7 years. So even though we've had a lot, it's not really to that level. There's been a lot of activity in terms of single family, in different cities. So Atlanta's seen a lot more than Charlotte has. And then looking at that 2 to 4 units, we're all trying to get there, but there's not really a ton of activity in the 2 to 4 units. Of course, we're seeing more in Minneapolis and in Austin than what Charlotte has seen. Minneapolis for sure, because they've had this in place for longer than we have. But I'm going to kind of focus in on Austin and Minneapolis for a couple of minutes. So Minneapolis, so the city of Minneapolis is 57 square miles. It's about half the population of the city of Charlotte. And one thing that I think is important, and I'll talk about it in a moment, is that they really don't have any undeveloped lands. And so this is built out. And so everything that's coming through for them is coming through as an infill development, which is also why you're not seeing a ton of unit activity, because it's a small city and there's not a lot of undeveloped land. They adopted the ordinance in 2020, allowing single-family detached duplexes and triplexes in all residential zoning districts. But there's a number of standards and criteria that they have in place for the units. There's a maximum height, which, we have some height limitations as well. They're using floor area ratio, which is something that we've talked about with the city of Charlotte, but it's complicated when we're not in control of the building permit process. And so floor area ratio is not just about the footprint, it's actually taking into account the entire square footage of the building in relation to the size of the lot. So they've got some limitations there, but they've got this like 17 or 27, I can't remember which one, point checklist that all projects that are proposing duplexes and triplexes have to go through. And so if you kind of go around sort of the list here, there's trees, they have a checklist, or they have points for your building materials, building height, the location of the garage, if there's a basement, if they've got street facing windows, what the side windows look like, if there's a front porch, or what type of stormwater control. So out of all the things that they're doing, the only thing that the city of Charlotte or the state of North Carolina is allowed to do is regulate trees, height, and stormwater. And so everything else that they're doing is outside of the purview of what Charlotte can control. And so they're using design to help ensure compatibility that in a way that Charlotte is unable to. Austin is a little more similar in terms of size of the city and the population. Their standards for single family detached duplexes and triplexes, they're really in most all of the residential zoning districts, but there are a couple that that have some limitations for these structures. They've got about 2,600 acres that are undeveloped or buildable. And so a little bit more than, slightly more than what Minneapolis has. And they also use things like floor area ratio. That's, I'm seeing that as a common theme that many cities are using, but they also have some requirements for where the garage is located on the lot and how it's placed and how that relates to the lot. They've got requirements to make sure you've got a front porch, so there's a presence on the street for the unit, and there's only one driveway cut allowed unless you go through a permitting process to get additional driveway cuts. So Charlotte, again, similar to Austin in size of city and population. Of course, this went into effect in June of 2023. So the interesting thing, though, is we have a lot more undeveloped and buildable land than those two other cities do, which presents both an opportunity and a question, and one in which in the last two big city planning directors meetings I've been to, I've been like, hey, what are you doing about subdivisions? Because we're, kind of struggling with this a little bit, and, just like empty faces and stares from Austin and Minneapolis, because they're like, I don't know, we don't have any undeveloped land. And so this has been something that I started talking to them about a year ago, like, how are you managing this? So again, that's a huge opportunity for housing supply, but it also is untested in terms of how zoning reform is implemented and missing middle is implemented in our cities. The two standards that we have for managing duplexes and triplexes are really looking at height, so in the form of sidewalls, and then driveways. And we've talked a little bit about that, and that's really all that we've regulated thus far. And then just internally, I've mentioned this at council, we sit down as a department and look at site plans. And so from the comprehensive plan team, the UDO team, the permitting team, our urban design team, we all sit down and we look at site plans, and we talk about, okay, well, this is great, or this is not really what we intended. How can we, is this a problem, or is this just something to watch? And so we've been looking at site plans for about a year now. And when we look at them, we go back to the comp plan, because this is, we always should start with our goals. And our goals are increasing the diversity of housing by increasing the presence of middle density housing, and then also ensuring that we have opportunities for residents of all incomes to access affordable housing. So those are really the two goals that when we're looking through site plans and looking through implementation, making sure that we're aligning with those goals. So I wanted to bring forward, this is from the place type manual. And so there's a description and for each of the place types and what we're trying to accomplish. And so again, this is also going back to vision. And I wanted to highlight a couple things that, we've spent some time really internally talking about and discussing. And some of the things, that are in the manual talk about single family detached homes are the primary use, smaller lot, single family detached developments like townhomes and small multifamily buildings are also found on some, 4+ lane arterials. The greatest density of housing in this place type is located within a half mile of a neighborhood center, community activity center, regional activity center. So there's some locational things in there. And the typical form is a single family residential building, 3 to 4 stories, townhome style buildings, 4 to 6 units. So again, when we're looking at this, we're thinking that, okay, single family detached is still the primary use. We think that we may need to make some adjustments to allow some of the more intense residential building types that we haven't before, and then really making sure we're addressing the locational criteria that's important. So I'm going to take, we talked about, quality, quantity, and location. I'm going to kind of talk through each of those. So starting with quality, because that's really when we got the referral, staff was already really looking at the quality of the site plans that we were seeing. And we've heard from the community, we heard from council, and we heard from our own internal staff, some concerns about the quality of the plans that we were seeing. Walkability was not where we thought it should be. There was a lot of driveway cuts. We're not getting quite the tree canopy that we are hoping for. That's really important. And I mean, the recent tree canopy analysis gave us some ideas that we might actually be able to be a 50 by 50 city, which was pretty great. But not seeing some real conflicts between building intensity and density and tree canopy preservation. And then also just the quality of the open space that we're getting. And then just acknowledging internally and making sure that the public and our appointed and elected officials understand what we're allowed to regulate and what we are not allowed to regulate, because the design aesthetics law that is now part of 160D really has some very clear restrictions as to what we can do. So from that came two recommendations, and we've talked about this before, but again, want to bring this to this group because I think that you all are in a place in which I think you are very much an advocate of the work that the planning department has been working on. And so wanting to talk through these recommendations with you in planning commission. So the number one recommendation, or the first recommendation, is focusing on quality standards by improving conservation development. I'll go through that in a moment. The second, related to quality, is to revisit our missing middle housing allowances. And so what does that look like in terms of ensuring quality middle density housing? So talking about density, so like the number of units we are seeing and making sure we're getting the housing supply that we need, while also remembering that there are, we try to plan for all the people that are coming to Charlotte, but we also need to remember the people that are living here today. And so again, I mentioned like the mix of housing just finally got to be something that we weren't really interested in pursuing. It's too prescriptive. And so really understanding that when quality is lacking, that's really when the quantity then becomes more of an issue. So in terms of quantity, again, recommendation number 2, right sizing our housing diversity with appropriate housing types that meet the intent of the 2040 plan. And then lastly, location. So council has been talking about these strategic investment areas, and this is where investments in the future will really be focused. And that investment that they're talking about is really aligned with the centers. And so as outlined in the comprehensive plan and in the UDO and in our policy map, that those are linked. And so we're really wanting to make sure that we are aligning our housing supply with where we're making investments. And then that leads us to recommendation number 3, is to create a development option that allows for compact lot sizes, so smaller lot sizes, when you're near centers or transportation corridors, or when you're providing affordable housing, because no matter what, I think that is a struggle that all cities are seeing, is affordable housing and making sure that we are providing as many opportunities and removing as many barriers to providing affordable housing as we can. All right, so recommendation number 1, this is the conservation development. We've talked about this before. It is a development option. It allows you to deviate from the lot sizes that are based in the UDO in exchange for providing additional open space. Before I get to that. So this is a practice, has been around for decades in planning. It is, the concept is that you cluster housing with smaller lot sizes in order to achieve more meaningful tree save and or open space. And so you can see that instead of having the open space contained within the lots, you're putting the open space all together for future preservation and or utilization by the people that are living in the community. So higher quality open space, higher quality tree save, and smaller lots. So what we are finding is that we don't think that we've calibrated this appropriately. We've got the quality of open space is not ideal. We've got individual lots that are facing onto stormwater facilities. We've got lots that are facing a 10 or 20 foot strip of green space, really grass. We've got a long, narrow open space, not large quality open space, just not a commitment to usable, high quality open space. We're missing some transitions between existing development and new development. And probably the thing that concerns me the most is the access by alleys instead of public streets. I've talked to a number of developers. I fully understand that the cost of building a public street is expensive. But the problem with an alley is that that is ultimately, while it's less expensive today, ultimately the responsibility of maintaining that alley is on the neighborhood. And so it's just a deferred cost and is a cost that is unknown to most people that move into the development, that they will ultimately be responsible for that. The alleys don't require the same network of sidewalks, and they aren't providing any requirements for trees. Couple of examples. So you'll see at the top, the long, narrow open spaces. You've got buildings facing onto those small open spaces. So really just a very small distance between those lots facing one another. You've got lots facing onto stormwater facilities. You've got pretty much an entire network of alleys. Here's another one where you've got open space in between the adjacent property and the lots facing that small, narrow open space. Again, there's not a lot of high quality open space on this site. So what we're proposing for the conservation development, again, this is up for public hearing on Monday, is to increase the quality and quantity. So require an additional 15% of green area, tree save, and common open space for 40% total. We've heard some questions about this number. Is that number too high? And we've looked into other peer cities. This is a common number in Chatham County, Raleigh, a number of different cities in North Carolina have similar standards like this. So it's working, and it's been in place in Raleigh for a number of years. Making sure open space cannot be on individual lots. We're increasing the minimum dimensions of open space to make them higher quality, and then providing standards for what usable open space is. And then again, improving the transitions and public street requirements. So adding a required perimeter buffer or a landscape yard, and requiring lots to front public street, a green area, or open space, not having a lot front a private street or an alley. Wanted to show you an example. So again, I mentioned that we hired a consultant it's been doing some site testing for us. And at first glance, you may be like, oh, that's not terribly different. But when you look in a little bit closer, it's just a higher amount of higher quality open space. The lots that are on the alternative concept plan that's been developed using the standards that we're proposing, every lot is fronting a public street or is fronting high quality open space. You just have larger areas set aside for the development to be able to utilize the smaller lot sizes in exchange for just a better, higher quality development. You've got greater transitions around the perimeter for existing as a transition between existing and new neighborhoods. And yes, there is a reduction in the number of units between the two. And again, this is an option in the UDO. This is not our base development standard. So you are getting something we're asking you to provide something higher quality standard in order to be able to utilize the ability to reduce lot sizes. Number two is right sizing housing diversity. And so I'm going to show this in word form, and I'm going to show this in chart form just to make sure that everyone understands. So again, what we are finding as we're doing these deeper dives, as we're talking to other cities, as we're looking at what the direction that the city of Charlotte is going, is that we originally took a blanket approach in all 6 N1 zoning districts to allow the same exact things in all 6 zoning districts. So what's the point of having 6 zoning districts if you allow the same things in all of them? The lot standards deviated, but we didn't have a difference in what you're allowing. And so what we're proposing is, I kind of view it as like moving the chess pieces around a little bit. It is not just taking things off the table, it's limiting triplexes to corners and arterials and in 1A through D, allowing stacked quads. So stacked quads are a historic building type that we have lots of in the city of Charlotte. They're a great product, and until the state changed the building code that now allow them to be considered under the residential building code, have not been built recently. And so they're a great product, the same footprint as a duplex, but we're actually getting 4 units instead of 2. So allowing them on corners and arterials, right now, we only allow them on corners with an affordable unit. So increasing that, allowing them everywhere in D, E, and F, and then introducing townhomes in E and F, which aren't allowed today. In order to really do a decent townhome project, you've got to go to a neighborhood 2 zoning district. And then in general, like, as I was saying earlier, like, we're not getting a ton of duplexes. So is it the driveway standards? Is it the sidewall heights? What is it that is limiting the viability? Because frankly, we need more duplexes. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about those two, triplexes are not a building type that you're going to find in Charlotte or in the Southeast. I'll talk about that in a second. And so it's challenging because I don't think that we quite know how to regulate it. And I'm not sure that we're still trying to figure out what a triplex would look like in Charlotte. This is one that's being built today in South Charlotte. I also, again, want to point out duplex, a stacked quad over in the bottom right. We've got a lot of these in our inner ring neighborhoods. They're a great opportunity for housing supply that is underutilized. And now that we have an opportunity with the change in the residential building code, I think we need to make an adjustment to make sure that we are allowing them in the city. So as I mentioned, triplexes are not a typical building type for the Southeast or for Charlotte. It really comes from New England. Normally seen, they're called like triple deckers, and they're stacked on top of one another. Really more see them in like a 9 or 12 unit building rather than in a 3. And you can see in the Opticos, so this is a very famous missing middle housing diagram talking about what we have not been building for decades as a nation, really. We've been building single family homes and we've been building apartments, nothing in between. And you're not really even seeing that, in the continuum there. It's like a duplex side by side to a 4-plex to a courtyard, cottage court, townhomes. We're not really, triplexes is just, it's not a typical building type. So this is the chart. I think Monica put this together. I think it's great because it just really helps show where we were and where we are now and what we're proposing. And so the green is what's allowed. And so you've got your old zoning districts over there on the left, and then your continuum of housing across the top. So green is allowed, yellow is restrictions of some type, or just not allowed at all if it's gray. And so, of course, before we only allowed duplexes on corners in R3 through R6 and didn't allow anything else. Today, we allow single family duplexes and triplexes in all 6 zoning districts. Quads are only allowed when they are on an arterial and when there's an affordable unit. And a townhome and a small multifamily building is limited in terms of how many buildings and where. And we don't really even have much N1F on the ground at all. So what we're proposing, again, is kind of moving these pieces around a little bit, limiting triplexes to corners and maybe arterials, and then starting to introduce a stacked quad in more of the zoning district, and then increasing how we're allowing townhomes and small multifamily buildings for a greater allowance of building types within the N1 zoning district continuum. The last recommendation relates to a compact development form. I've talked a lot to Habitat for Humanity in the last few weeks, looking at their projects. This is one of their projects. And understanding how important it is to have a 50-foot lot width. That's really when you're building in an existing neighborhood, you tend to have larger lot sizes, and that's how the UDO is laid out, is to protect the lot sizes of existing neighborhoods. But when you're creating a new subdivision, many of the units are smaller. They because the buildings are more efficient. There's a market trend, both with apartments and with homes, that it's more about the amenity and open space that's within the development or within the apartment building and less about the units. So they tend to be smaller and need to be on smaller lots. So the idea is that you create a development option that allows you to skip up 2 zoning districts. So that's what the +2 zoning district is. So if you're in N1A, you can use the standards from N1C, B to D, C to E, and so on. So that when you are in areas that are within, let's say, a mile of a center place type or a transportation corridor, and you include a little bit more open space, you're allowed to go down to these lot standards, which essentially gets you higher density yield or more unit yield. Or if you're an affordable housing project, then it doesn't matter where you can skip to these lot standards. So that's the idea for those. Again, the conservation development, we had an info session last week. We have another one this evening. The public hearing is scheduled for April and a decision in May. The other 2 recommendations about right sizing, intensity, and compact development, we are planning on an engagement like this, talking to you all, talking to the community and info sessions over the course of a couple months. We are doing a design charrette and we've invited designers from both market rate as well as affordable projects to sit down with drawing paper and, scales and such, and just design with us and see how we can make sure that the compact development form that we are proposing introducing meets the needs of the housing supply in Charlotte. So that's scheduled for next week. Right now, we're tentatively planning to file in May, public hearing in June, and decision in July. And then I also wanted to mention too that we've got a cleanup text amendment, the 3rd one, that's also moving through the engagement and filing process, and hoping to have a decision on that in June. Again, all of these proposed changes have a number of different opportunities for public engagement. And I wanted to kind of conclude with here that this is what we're going to talk about today, and I'm sure we'll follow with a very lively discussion after I finish talking. That this is really like we've been spending the last year talking about this and analyzing this. There's not a lot of other things that we are actively working on, but this is one that has been controversial from the beginning. But now that we have data and we've got site plans that we're seeing buildings come out of the ground, we have really taken some time and thought and effort to think through, okay, what do we need to change to make sure that we're meeting what we originally intended in the comprehensive plan. So I'll mention that you can see whenever we've got anything redlined and out for review, you can go to UDO and amendments on charlotteudo.org. And with that, I will stop and answer lots of questions.
Thank you, Allison. Does anybody? Oh, look, Mr. Winokur, would you like to go first? Followed by Mr. Lansdale. It's only because I looked to the left.
Sorry, Terry.
I'm feeling a little bit here, dear.
Come sit next to me, Terry. Don't be afraid. Allison, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I'm not a land use professional. I'm not a real estate professional, and I could understand it. So thank you.
Good. That's an accomplishment, right?
Right.
there.
So, I am your lowest common denominator in the room. But I did have a couple of quick questions. there have been different numbers, especially I think in the last month or so, there was some reporting about what are we looking at in terms of population growth here in Charlotte, which obviously is a really, really good thing. We don't want negative growth because then that means closing schools and a sick city. So we want to encourage good development, and I'm glad we're doing it. What are the numbers that you're aware of? And if you could point me in the direction, or other commissioners later, please do, in terms of our, missing number of units of housing that we need. I remember that they talked about that a lot a few years ago, and haven't heard those numbers bandied about as much.
Yeah, and I didn't listen to Rebecca's presentation last night, and I know she talked about that, so I can get that. I don't have like the latest, but
Sure.
it's probably like 30-something thousand. I mean, it's a good number. So it's a lot.
The other thing is, and just for my own background and edification, so that as I'm talking to neighbors, about, what are our needs, what's going on. And I've seen some persuasive looking images anyway, talking about, like, for instance, the city of Houston, the amount, a much bigger square footage, but they have really gone out with some suburban sprawl, and the amount of cost that requires to subsidize that kind of suburban sprawl. I'm assuming that all came up during the UDO conversation when I wasn't here.
Yeah, it actually came up in the comprehensive plan, and so they did a fiscal impact analysis that looked at different patterns of growth and what cost that would be to the city, and found that it's more cost effective to prioritize centers and grow in that way rather than sprawl like you're talking about. And so kind of doubling down on creating that 10-minute neighborhood is less expensive for a city to maintain. And so the consultant found that the development patterns that we were proposing were, financially beneficial.
That tax burden on
Mhm.
sustaining sprawl development, I feel like is a compelling piece. And anyway, my fellow commissioners, if you can point me in the direction of what's been done, or if anyone on your staff happens to know, please don't create anything, obviously, but I'm curious as to what those numbers were when they were figuring that out.
Sure. I mean, Candace can send out a copy of that final report, and there's some good, you don't have to, if you want to be an economist and dig down into the details of that, you can have that, or you can skip to the summary tables. And so I think it's really helpful to see that we did consider the economics of future growth and how we are growing for that reason. Because yes, sprawl is not, it's costly and it's painful.
Right.
So.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lansdale.
Gosh, can anybody guess what I'm going to be asking about? So some transportation bits and pieces here. And this is just for the record, and I'll try to be brief about before I present my specific question and opposition to moving forward at this time on these particular conversations. In regards to requirements by law, let's see, any proposed subdivisions when existing or planned streets and highways with other public facilities and for the distribution of population and traffic in a manner that will avoid congestion, overcrowding, and will create conditions that substantially promote public health, safety, and general welfare, gives us, my understanding, the ability to make these kinds of regulations. As we move, and you can, if you wouldn't mind putting up any slide with the word arterial on it as a key component of the argument. So I am, if this was a brick wall, my head would be bleeding right now. Because when we use, my apologies for being so forward, but when we use the word arterial, by our own definition, it includes main streets, avenues, boulevards, parkways. That's every street except for an interstate or a toll road. The notion that we are using this update and not specifying clearly which arterial designations, because our arterial designations include avenues. That's a 2-lane avenue, a 2+ lane avenue, 3, 4, 5, 6+ lane avenue, a 4-lane, 5-lane, 6-lane boulevard, a collector street, limited access roads. You can't use that in any way, shape, or form where I can get behind saying any of these quadruplexes on corners and arterials, that means every street. I just have a lot of issues with that. I am very forward in my conversation and have been in my time here and prior. It's very clear that transportation has to define land use. And we're seeing in these amendments that land use is going forward without transportation consideration. That is a bit of hyperbole. You are thinking about it, but it's in the way it's presented. And my problem with that, I think there's 4 or 5 slides that directly allocate usage and changes with an overarching use of the word arterial. And that is, until we get more specifics about that, I can't feel it. I can't see it. And some of the images that you showed there regarding private roads, public roads versus state roads, all those bits and pieces, just too complicated for me to grasp right now. I appreciate that some folks are getting it, but from a transportation lens, my retinas are burning looking at the sun. So thanks.
Sure. And we, I mean, I think and that's great feedback. I think the word arterial is more probably symbolic, and Laura, please jump in and add anything. We can get more specific with that. I think the idea is just that there's a difference between a street with a lot of activity or utilization versus an internal local street that may not have great access, and that there should be a differentiation in the uses that are allowed in those two extremes. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's a great example, because I think one of the earlier notes that I wrote down is we have 12,000 underdeveloped acres, and any change from an N1 on a 2-lane arterial with that general classification is going to be inappropriate to me, because that arterial, whatever that definition, secondary definition is by the Charlotte Streets Design Manual and the UDO itself as its definition page, has to be rejected, because we don't have the transportation solution first. We're driving transportation solutions after. And I do want to say commend you on those examples that you made for how the site plans change, because that's a great step forward. But we need an egg before we get a chicken. And I'm saying that we have that kind of priority first. We have to be more clear on what arterials are, because the dais, people in the general public, they're not going to go to page 186 in the state law and 867 in their UDO and try to figure out what the heck an arterial means. And I think how it affects them is when they see the yellow sign in their neighborhood and they go, I don't want a 4-story building right here on the corner lot next to me, even though it's clearly states it's on a road, which is an arterial. So that's where I come from. Thanks for the extra time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilden.
Yeah, thank you. So when was the last time the tree ordinance was updated?
2019, is that right?
So,
Well, and with the UDO, yeah.
okay, so we're hearing from city council members that they want more trees. They're worried about the tree canopy, but yet they're not updating the tree ordinance. Is that correct? So 36 trees per acre. Tim Porter is saying that that's not enough, that he wants it to be updated, but they're not updating it.
So, so this is so we did a major, or we did a, what do we call it? A quick win, I think it was a word, in 2019 with the tree ordinance in advance of the UDO. I think we made a lot of forward progress with the UDO in terms of tree canopy preservation. And now we have the tree canopy data. And so we are in the process, in procurement process right now of hiring a consultant to do a tree canopy action plan 2.0. And so that'll be another deep dive into the tree world that from that will likely stem some updates to the UDO in terms of making sure we meet whatever tree canopy goal is decided through that effort.
Okay, and then Tim Porter mentioned that he's hiring people to go check sites to make sure that developers are actually replacing trees or saving trees. What is the status on that?
So we were very grateful to have been awarded some positions from the last year's budget. And because the tree regulations, particularly on the individual lot size, were so vastly different than what we've been able or have done in the past, that we haven't hired them all at once, just kind of seeing how things go. But so we're staffed now. And so he has a team that can then go and do those compliance checks, because it's kind of like, it's like a colander. It's like the holes are really big and a bunch of trees were falling out of the holes because you didn't have anybody there looking to plug them up. So yeah, he's got a team of people working on that now.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like we're trying to, save the trees and all the things. And, I've made it my life work to do that. I've been doing environmental work for years, I don't even know, a long time. But it seems like there's a very simple action that could happen pretty rapidly to allow these UDO amendments and everything that are supposedly about environmental issues to kind of like have more public comment. And that's kind of where I'm just like, city council can do something like within the next month or two. Whereas I feel like these need a little bit more public comment than they might be getting.
So do you have a suggestion?
Tim Porter said that he wants to increase the amount of trees per acre. And he said it in our meeting where he presented to us. He's been saying it to WFAE. He said something 7 days ago on WFAE, both written and on the radio. There's like multiple articles where he says it, and yet nothing's happened yet. So.
Well, I think as part of the conservation, it's tree save and open space is really what you're trying to get to. So, that is a part of the proposal.
Anybody else? Commissioner Russell.
All right, I want to open with a quick phrase that I'm going to be burning into everyone at this table and in this room's memory. The math is relentless. What the hell does that mean? So I'm not picking on Erin, but she's in the development world. She understands the math is relentless. You understand that in order to get anything done, the math has to work. And what that means is the amount of money coming in has to be less than the amount of money. The amount of money coming in has to be more than the amount of money going out. But that also means that you have to understand when you're doing development, do you have enough math to make it work? And that math applies to land area and building size and construction units. And so I'm looking at the proposed changes, and my question is, what math was done, one, to take us backward on triplexes, but two, what math confirms that stacked quads in N1A, B, and C need to be only on corners and arterials? Has the math been done to prove to us that that's what needs to happen?
There's no way that you could do the math of any of this down to a parcel level, because every parcel is under the responsibility and the purview of what they want to do with their land. So even if you did all the math in the world, you still can't account for property owner decisions and market conditions and all of the individual factors that are part of developing a site that have to do with topo or, soil that's impossible math to do, because you would have to make a lot of assumptions. And so what the proposal is here is up for discussion. So, this is why, we're talking about a design charrette for the Compact Development Forum. And this is why we are talking to this body who have people that are on the ground like yourself developing to give us feedback. I totally understand the math, and that, you're not going to be able to make it work if the math doesn't, it has to be it can't be in the red, you're not going to develop in the red.
Correct.
But remembering that even in other cities, there's not a lot of activity on triplexes, because it's a building type that like most people are either doing a duplex or they're doing a townhome or they're doing a quad. They're just, it's not the desired product type from a development standpoint, from everything that I've been told. So if the conversation is that we should increase the allowances of stacked quads, I love stacked quads. I mean, I would love to hear from you all. It's like, maybe we should allow them everywhere. I mean, I am open to having that conversation. So,
Well, I
But-
think they should. I think that everything to the left of stacked quads should be allowed by right, period. And we're saying that we're doing it because we're not seeing it being built and other cities aren't building it. But again, we haven't done the math to figure out why that is. Have we looked at space constraints? Have we looked at the zoning setbacks? Have we looked at the easements? Those are the types of math that you can do on a city level to make you understand whether or not that product can and should be built. And I think that what I want to get away from is just kind of the arbitrary, well, it's not done here or other cities do it, so we should carry that over, without really kind of thinking about what is the goal that we're looking for. Are we looking to house people in Charlotte and have some place for these people to stay? Or are we just saying that and then not really doing it? Because look, I mean, to your question, Rick, you said, hey, how many people are moving to Charlotte? Charlotte's about 950,000, 15th largest city in America. Number 10 city in America is there's only 120,000 people difference, the last number I saw, between the 10th city in America and Charlotte. 120,000. That's essentially all of this outland towns in Mecklenburg County right now. That's a small number.
So, but a triplex, in order to make a triplex be a home ownership opportunity, you're going to have likely 3 driveways, so 3 driveway cuts on a lot that, ultimately, maybe they lead to a garage, maybe they don't. I can't require that there is a garage. And so at that point, even, and I've always been for eliminating parking minimums, but that doesn't mean that people are going to park their cars outside of Charlotte and not drive. That means that on that lot, you potentially have 6 cars like in front of the lot. And so my question then is, where's the open space? What are we doing about stormwater? Where are the trees? How are we making room for that? Like in a residential neighborhood that you are trying to maintain a pedestrian focused environment. And so there's a conflict there.
But to your point, then why are we requiring every unit to have a driveway? Like if
We're
it's just
not.
if it's an attached triplex, which can happen, then you're saying that you're requiring a driveway. That seems to me to be arbitrary. I would think that you would just want to have enough parking for 3 cars. So why are we doing that? If you think about it, because to add more to that point, the city of Durham has a thing where they allow flag lots. So you could build that triplex and all you have to do is have 5 foot of frontage that allows you to do multiple setback units and then have driveways like you said, or give you access to it and have frontage to it. And I mean, that solves the problem kind of elegantly there.
But then right now, we have a limitation for driveways because we aren't wanting to have that impervious area in front of the unit. And then when you want to go and sell that lot, how are you carving that up? How are you putting in some type of easement that has shared use of that driveway, and your neighbor decides he's going to sleep in one day and he's blocking you in and you can't get out. I mean, or how are you actually getting that finance with the bank and like not really understanding like who's using that and when and where and why. I mean, so it gets very complicated. And we have talked about taking a triplex and turning it on its side and parking in the rear and on the side. And that really starts to be more like a townhome. And we've heard some concerns from our UDO advisory committee about having a parking lot in the rear of the building, right in someone's backyard. And so at that point, that's when we're like, well, townhomes are really the most important thing that we have under allocated for. And so the focus then became on how do we increase townhomes? Because that's where the market is, that's where the financing is, that's where home ownership opportunities exist. And we need to focus our efforts on that, because even nationally, when looking at the other cities, they're not building triplexes, they're building townhomes. And so I don't want us to focus on trying to solve the problem for a unit type when that's not really where people are wanting to go.
Right. So just, I'm gonna leave this subject alone, but just point of clarification, you can actually get an FHA loan for a quadplex and own it. So I mean, the financing part isn't a problem if you're a homeowner. And I think that that's what these duplex, triplex, quadplex conversations need to be tailored toward, or people who own property or who want to increase the amount of units on the property that they own but can't because it's not allowed. And I think if we have that conversation as opposed to what typologies can we limit in certain places, that's a whole different conversation. And I think what that will allow us to do, number one, is increase home ownership, increase wealth, reduce displacement, because you're allowing people who already own the property to increase the units and house more people. Chances are they're going to be renting to people that they know,
right?
Which means that they're not just going to be making for a cash grab. The other part of this is I'm looking at is, to Terry's point, we talked about corners and arterials. And so my question is, does Charlotte have a density map?
Not today.
Okay. So
Not more with the EDO.
Right. I would think that, number one, that's something that you need. And then number two, I would say that you actually do have a density map. That's just not what we're calling it. So if you look at the map that your staff did for the parcels, about the 5 acres, you did a very good delineation of the outline parts. We saw the measles, all the red dots everywhere on the outside of 45. It looked like measles. It broke me out. This is not Florida. We don't have outbreaks.
Freckles.
I'm sure measles was where we should do it.
Freckles. But then if you look at the interior of the city, there were a lot of places that were colored purple. And if you just kind of looked at a map of Charlotte and looked at those purple lines, you see, number one, the blue line was very accurately represented. You also saw places like Prosperity Village, South Park, Valentine, River District. All of these places are places that are dense already. And we know that they're dense and we know they're going to densify. So I would say we could take that map and call it what it is, a density map, and say, hey guys, and I'm being a little bit bull in the China shop here, we're going to cram as many people in those purple areas as we can get. And if you don't live in a purple area, congratulations, you're good. But what that allows us to do is to say, hey, developers, hey, you're going to build dense products in this purple area. City council now knows purple area. Community now knows purple area. So now they've got a business decision to make in where they live. That also solves your problem with you're talking about as far as locational criteria, because if I know I'm putting everything on a certain place that's going to be dense, then necessarily I'm going to have to step it down. So now I know where my step down boundaries are. So now what I'm doing is taking Terry's point of using transportation and using existing employment centers as dense areas and then stepping down. And we all know where that transition is going to be. And we know what we need to look for in the future as opposed to kind of playing that whack-a-mole. So I think that that's something that we should look at is having a density map, calling it that, and having that conversation. Because I think when you can see it on a map, I think a lot of the issues that people have are because they just see the big yellow Z and they freak out. It's been a cow pasture for 30 years. Now there's a big yellow Z and I don't know what the hell's going on. And I'm going to go raise all the hell I want to because I don't want to lose my $600,000 house that I can't sell.
And so I don't disagree with you. Like, I think that we've assumed that growth should be done in a similar way across the entire city. And I think that growth should follow the creation of a 10-minute neighborhood. It should follow our transportation corridors. And right now, we've been asked by City Council to develop a map of where we're seeing these larger residential developments, and we're going to have that soon. I kind of got a preview earlier this morning, and I'd say for the most part, they are not within a mile of a center. They're not within a transportation corridor. They're in the ETJ, and they're in other places that are not where we are matching our infrastructure priorities. And so I think that the idea of this as an infill, development, and then the conversations that we're talking about on the subdivision side of it from compact to conservation are trying to match increasing density where it's most important. And so I'm not calling it a density map. I'm sure, I think that would, I'm sure people would love it if I came out with a density map, but I don't think that we're misaligned with what we're both trying to say is needed. I think that there is location importance attached to where we need to focus our housing supply. And so I'm all ears about how best to do that.
All right, we're going to go to the last question.
So I don't really have a question. I just have a response. Well, first, when we decide to develop quadplexes in the center of the neighborhoods in South Park, I'm going to give them your cell phone number so they can all call you when we have as of right quadplexes in all the older neighborhoods in South Park. But I wanted to just mostly respond. I mean, first of all, thank you it was really enlightening to see all of this and see all the work that I know y'all have done, Allison, behind the scenes for the last year. But secondly, just to sort of defend the whole idea of like case studies and sort of figuring out if it works or it doesn't work. Right now, just speaking from my own experience and my colleagues in the development world that I know are saying the same thing, nothing really works in town very feasibly. And so the main driver of that, I mean, yes, financing is an issue, but that's an issue everywhere. But the main driver of that is land values, right? So the people that own land are looking at prices from 24 months ago, and they're like, that's my price. And if you don't give me that price, I'm not selling, which makes sense because they're looking at kind of historical what's been happening over the last, 3 to 5 years. So the idea of looking at a site in South End against, a site in Huntersville or a site, down by the South Carolina border, they wouldn't be at all comparable, even if you go just the north and south sites. So just to support, I mean, in addition to the actual like shapes of the parcels and everything being different. So just a note that, I mean, a lot of these sort of ultimate densities are being driven by of course, construction costs, financing, market demand, but also just the land values, which I think is just a piece that wasn't mentioned. So I wanted to mention it. That was all.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. And apparently Commissioner Seeley is going to have the last question.
No, I just want to tell a little story about why I live in a single family house. Because when I moved back to Charlotte from New York, I was looking for a place that I could buy. I looked at a whole lot of townhouses. Ideally, I wanted a duplex or a quad because I have this thing called parents and they are aging. Being able to age in place in Charlotte is pretty vital. I did not end up buying a townhouse, even though it would have been better in my price range and it would have worked for me because my parents would not have been able to visit me because they cannot walk upstairs. Quads eliminate that as a possibility because you have 2 walk-up single floor units that are right at the ground level. That should be allowable everywhere. Okay, maybe not everywhere, but pretty much everywhere. Yeah, pretty much everywhere. But it's vital. Townhouses don't work for everybody. If there had been a quad for me, I would be living in a quad now. Instead, I'm living in a single family house and I will be building an apartment for my parents in the backyard that they don't have to walk upstairs to get to. So just wanted to mention that because it's our aging community and also people that rely on ADA, they are being left out when it comes to townhouses and duplexes and anything that does not have an elevator or need stairs to access it. So
no, I don't. I mean, I had a similar issue when my dad was still with us and the walkability aspect. And so I completely feel you in that. I think the ADUs and the, increased flexibility for those, I think was a step forward. But yeah, the stacked quads is absolutely a great opportunity for that because yes, there are challenges with stairs, that not everyone can navigate those. And so then, yes, a townhome is not an option, whereas a quad is just taking that and, turning it up instead, instead of being more horizontal. So
Yeah.
I think it's a great product.
And honestly, I think a lot of the things that frustrate me with the city is outward communications and marketing around some of these concepts. When the streetcar was happening, no one in the community seemed to know that it would take 90 days for, without incident for it to open, or what even the purpose of a streetcar is. I don't think that people understand what the purpose of a triplex, a quad is. I mean, in half of the rezoning meetings we have, people are presenting triplexes and quads that are actually townhouses.
Correct, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think we need to do a lot as a body here, to talk to our neighbors, to talk to people that follow us, but also just to lean on the city to market this more effectively, because I think people have very different ideas about what these products are. And they probably see them every day riding around Charlotte, and don't realize that those buildings have never bothered them.
Right.
So why not have more of them? So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Seeley. And because I have the microphone, I have the vague last question, and it's really only a comment. And it begins with one of those things that we've all heard, and it relates to triplexes. 3 is a magic number. So just take that with you. Allison, I will slide in behind Will's point just to say that there were a couple of things in there, numbers that perhaps even if they are not at a micro level important, I think that they will have an influence in the market. When you put up the development project with the alternate project, there was a 15% shave on the yield in terms of houses. And I'm pretty sure that if you walked out to the development community and said, I'm going to give you 15% less stuff to try and make your money, they would not accept that as the way that life was going to be. And I'm just saying that because once you start putting the number up on screen, you can't take it back, right? Willie Horton exists, whether or not it was the truth or not. It's out there. So that's the way it goes. I think the other important number to realize is that if we have 12,000 acres of developable land, that land has different value in different parts of town, and that people seeking the lowest land cost. I took a look at the map. I took a look at the population map. I've been running this thing through a bunch. And one of the things that weirds me out is that, you hear about Nodar, you hear about Plaza Midwood, you hear about South End, but you don't hear about Steel Creek. And one of those has the largest population increase. And I'm saying it's not the first 3. And so if you want to know where people are going, then, we need to follow the dark green on the population map, because that's where Gaston County, I don't know why, but yeah, that. Okay. And all of the, it was the 12,000 acres are out far away,
Right.
and they're cheap, and they are by right developable. And you're going to tell me, I say this over and over again, it's about trade-offs. And the trade-off is, can I get cheap land or can I get density? And one of those may not be the priority of the development community as opposed to the priorities that the staff has set. Enough said.
Just real quick about the 15% haircut. I want to say that the starting line was a lot higher than it used to be in the past. So it may be a 15% haircut, but we were way over here. So
I understand that. I'm just saying that, what's going to happen is that people aren't going to make a rational decision based on what they see. No one's going to sit down and spend, even 5 minutes. They're going to see it and they're going to say, oh, I'm out, because everybody has a place where when they come into a negotiation, it's better to walk away than to stay in the negotiation. And when that number pops up, those people aren't going to do any research. And therein lies it's a balancing act of how you present this. And in this meeting, I have just gone past the line where I would stay in the game. So be conscious of that as it goes forward. All right. Love you, commissioners. Thank you. Now, but we do have to get on with the rest of our program today. And I would like to introduce to you Jep Pond, who is, Jep, what's Horde, Copeland, and Mock? Did I get that correct? And today we're going to get a look at the future of architecture. We used to have, nobody on the commission's an architect anymore, are they? No? Yeah, well. Yeah.
Much better
but I
copy,
mean,
right?
John Friday's not here, but John was an architect, and sitting with John dissecting site plans and stuff was just, it's amazing, and it's entertaining too. But Jeff's going to talk to us about some future technologies and things. And so take it away, Jeff.
Okay, great. So joining me today is Alan Engel from JLL. He is a specialist in technology, mostly on the side of translating design documents to use by owners. Online, we have Dave Alpert and Mike Hoping, who are with GeoPogo. And really, they've got the exciting stuff to show you. So due to time, I'm going to kind of blitz through a little bit of the beginning of the presentation, and Alan and I can come back or chat with you or
Yeah.
in any level of detail you want.
Let me ask commissioners, can we run over a little bit? Anybody going to have a cow if we run over a little bit? Okay, so
Okay, awesome.
give it to us full tilt.
All right, we'll give you the whole thing. So let's see. I think I should be sharing. Yes. Share screen. Guess that would be a good starting point. All right. Beginning. All right, there we go. So, Chair Welton reached out to me. I'm Douglas, sorry. Very formal. Reached out to me. I'm a chair of the TAP committee, which stands for Technology and Architectural Practice. We are part of a knowledge community. The A National has several knowledge communities in a variety of topics, and we have everything from Alan, who's a formed architect, now works for owners, to architects like myself, to construction managers. And we really want to talk about design and technology, how to make high performance buildings, how to integrate practice, and kind of share best practices and case studies. Again, we're not land use professionals, and we're not really in the world of real estate very much. Most of my work has been in the public realm of higher ed and K-12 schools. But the thing is, technology-wise, what we're doing on a building scale, we now are starting to have the power to do the same things on the broader planning scale. So what we're doing right now is kind of a look ahead to what you might see in a few years in planning. Oops. There we go. So we want to share 5 technology trends, and our friends from GeoPogo are going to do one deep dive. So
everyone, my name is Douglas, and we restarted the show. Welcome to our April 9th, April 9th, 2024.
Just pause it. Yeah. We must
Yeah.
have, the streaming must have stopped.
Okay.
am I sharing now?
Yeah, yes, you're still sharing. 1 second. Do you want me to restart the streaming? Yes, because you're,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why that happened. See, it says my streaming. I think it just started playing right. Oh,
Okay.
Okay, so we should be good. Go ahead and continue. I'll double check, make sure you're still.
Okay. So again, five five kind of trends that are impacting both building architecture and the bigger planning realm. The number one item is a kind of blockchain, which most of you guys know as the Bitcoin, as the underlying math behind Bitcoin. But it also works as a kind of a digital ledger. So anytime you make a transaction, you're part of a network where everybody trusts each other. So in terms of either supplying contracts, traceability of what you purchased, creating a long-term ledger of digital receipts of blockchain really helps in a lot of ways. So, you know, if you imagine everybody goes to their favorite pharmacy and gets the 10-foot long receipt, blockchains in many simplistic ways is like that, where every receipt has the calculations that link everything that works back. So you can do things like long-term land registry, you can track permitting, public procurement, and, you know, for our sustainability mind folks, things like embodied carbon. So when I buy something using the blockchain technology, not only do I get the receipt for when I purchase it, but there's a cumulative effect all the way down from, you know, if you think of, say, a piece of aluminum that's going to go in a building, all the way from mining it out of the ground to refining it, transporting it, refabricating it. You can track all of those, everything that's going into it, whether that's embodied carbon, things like having ethical supply chains so that I can know that if I buy, say, aluminum versus another product, was forced labor part of that? Was, or some unethical practice part of the chain of events? So that's really the basic advantage of blockchain, is it just to let you track all those receipts. So the second kind of foundational technology that everybody is highest on the hype cycle right now is artificial intelligence or machine learning. Personally, I prefer machine learning to artificial intelligence because everybody thinks of artificial intelligence means there's somebody competing with a human. But in most of the cases that we're talking about in AEC or architecture engineering use is something called narrow AI. So it's really made to do a specific task as opposed to general intelligence, which is kind of the realm of science fiction and philosophers and whatever. So, you know, as licensed professionals that go before planning commissions and city regulations or regulators, we're trying to figure this out right now, right? How do we incorporate AI, something that makes predictions, with what our professional opinion is and our professional work product? Again, AI is just getting started. You know, Sora can make videos. I can say, give me a video of a woman walking down the street, and it will spit out a video in the realm of images. There's both kind of iterative image making, like I can say, show me a triplex on a corner lot with trees, and AI will be able to interpret that and create a picture based on just that text prompt. And again, design presentations, audio is something new. Recently in the news, they kind of delayed some of the audio coming out because it's just too easy. From 30 seconds of my voice, I can type in text and it'll basically recreate my cadence and the sound of my voice to do, you know, fakes and different things like that. The way I kind of think about AI is it's really good at two problems. One is kind of being an expert assistant, where if you know a little, you can ask a question and ChatGPT or something will tell you a lot. But also there's another realm that where like the questions that you guys are pondering that have tons and tons of variables. AI can help you kind of look at big data sets and start to cluster information and filter information to see where divisions occur. One of our folks from the UNC Charlotte Design Computational Degree Program gave us a talk last week about AI, and they're doing a lot of research right now, taking big data sets like GIS, census data, and you can go through and pick a handful of things like tree cover, driveways, lot size, and then it'll comb through like plan data and start to cluster the changes between one area of the city and another. So it becomes a way to kind of investigate that data with, again, a kind of a digital assistant. So again, narrow AI typically is a prediction. You know, it's not really thinking when you have an AI. It's a series of mathematical operations in the background that all it's really doing is predicting the next letter, right? It's not trying to it doesn't have any volition or thought process. It's saying, tell me what the next letter is. And the same thing with images. Tell me what the next pixel in this, the next dot on this picture, what color it is. And the same way, in the same way that, computers start with X's and zeros, you kind of build up this simple system in complexity to go from predict what the next pixel is, or to take my model, put it in the woods, or take my model, show me a winter scene. So they can either formulate that whole cloth, or they can kind of augment it within another application. So most of you probably have seen Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, different things like that, are those kind of augmented applications that are embedded in another one. So getting a little more to the speculation side, but this is emerging technology. So, you can think of AI as having a generative component. So that would be, in your case, if I change the minimum lot size in Charlotte, if I've trained an AI, it can run thousands of simulations and show you some results. They'll diverge because, again, individual property owners are making individual decisions, but you can start seeing trend lines in terms of the way AI can predict, what would happen. So, just like a game, the early AI uses were for games. So, think of Go or chess. Humans have played a certain number of games, right? And that's maybe some small portion of every entire game that could ever be played. The nice thing about using AI to get at very difficult problems is that you can get a computer to play against each other, and not only can they play more games than you play in your life, they can play more games than any human has ever played. So they can start to see strategies that aren't kind of part of the normal tradition of a particular game.
Isn't that the Whopper or more game?
Right. Exactly. So in addition, well, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's all
No worries. Yeah, please stop me at any time you want to ask or have a comment. So in addition to kind of the generative of what happens if, you can also have a predictive AI. So not only, in your, the kind of planning case is I have every record or every project that's ever been approved for permitting in Mecklenburg County. And I want to look at a site and it can predict based on history what type of project would be allowed on that site. So this is predictive analytics has kind of been done manually for a lot of real estate folks, and now it's becoming more automated. So those are kind of the two big underlying technologies that are kind of touching everybody. More on the project level, BIM or Building Information Technology is about 25 years old, and that basically allows us to model something in 3D, make cuts of it, and then it also has a data component where every wall knows what kind of wall it is. I can tag, I can have the attributes of a database, but also have the attributes of something that's three-dimensional. So it's a three-dimensional of a database. So right now, we're designers. Alan's specialty here is getting it from the build portion where a contractor takes it over to the operation side. And then you guys are kind of next into the step because you would be the long-term infrastructure, if you think of it. So if you start building one building, right? And then all of a sudden you have hundreds or thousands of buildings that are modeled in Mecklenburg County, you can start to overlay them and build a bigger map of sorts. Locally, CMS has been collecting three-dimensional databases of their buildings for the last 10-ish years. So they're pretty far ahead and through the build portion.
But they're building the same thing over and over again, right? In general with their schools?
Well, they have prototype designs, but it's a similar building type.
Okay.
But they have a three-dimensional model of their schools. In the future, where you could analyze something like that, you could say, tell me, do schools do better if they have bigger windows or more daylight or that kind of thing? Or from a facilities point of view, which type of construction works best for maintenance over the long term, things like that.
Okay.
And again, the maturing of BIM has kind of made things like energy modeling much more affordable and more regular, in terms of even permitting and code. Right now, you can go through and do an energy performance calculation, and that's part of your code. And so, there's an evolution that I think is coming to where there's more computable codes. So instead of having thou shall do A, B, or C in terms of rules, there's more performance guideline, and that the model will tell you, hey, I've met this performance guideline. And the same thing could be true for, your zoning is trying to go from either form-based zoning or land use zoning, and you're trying to mix things, right? So having this type of performance data on a bigger level would allow you to make those trade-offs or evaluate those trade-offs better. And a lot of times it saves money. We found if I follow the prescriptive code, which is what the North Carolina building code says, you have to do it this way. Many times, majority of times, we actually end up with a lower performing building than spending the money in a way that's modeled ahead of time. So we can get a better performing building that costs less by meeting the performance goal versus having kind of a prescriptive goal. So our friends online are going to talk about this very quickly, augmented reality and virtual reality, and they're going to give you a little demo. So I'm going to skip over that. But just two terms, augmented reality is just basically if you use your your phone or a tablet to overlay an existing site with new information. And then virtual reality, of course, is, you know, like your Quest goggles or gaming, where everything that you see and experience is completely new. So the next major trend I'm gonna let Alan talk about.
All right.
You want to?
Yeah. So know your audience. I know we're trying to get to the next presenters. So I'm going to jump quickly through this. But to what Jeff was saying is you've got to create the data to actually get through this. I don't know if you've seen Iron Man or not. This is Iron Man 2. He has a physical model of the expo, but he can't get to what he needs to until he actually digitizes it. And so when he digitizes it, he's then able to turn off trees, do this, do that. So he has added an extra layer of information to it that allows him to kind of move forward with what he needs to. Well, that's kind of what we're doing with digital twins. And just asking you what these may be. It could actually be any of these things. This is kind of the one that we look at with JLL. And like Jeff said, we're actually helping owners take their product from schematic design all the way through to operations and continue to use the models that Jeff just told you about to manage, predict, and get information from their buildings. There is the digital twin consortium. That's kind of their full definition as they get into it. A lot of people would say scanning a building is a digital twin. There's some truth to that. But the bigger deal is we're trying to make sure that we make a connection between something that is virtual and something that is physical, and then something that ties them together. And that would be data associated with those two. And you can't really have one without the other per se, because they're both feeding off of each other in the process. As Jeff mentioned too, you know, all of these projects today are starting in BIM, and BIM is actually what's led us in the corporate real estate market to be able to move to the next step with these digital twins. Aerospace industry has been doing it for years. We weren't building buildings before. We weren't virtually building buildings before we were actually building them like the aerospace industry is. So that's now what's allowed us to take this next step in making sure that we can tie metadata to the buildings and carry it throughout the entire process. This is kind of what the digital twin stepping stone happens. Most of the industry is kind of in this descriptive or informative process. They're just learning to collect their data on their buildings. They don't have building data that they need that'll feed into kind of what Dave and them are going to show you next. But once you get there, then you can start predicting things. You always hear facilities people talk about reactive maintenance. That's because they don't have the data that they need to actually predict, do preventive maintenance, do other things like that. So we're helping our team. So for example, most of our JLL clients, we're now getting them there kind of off the start, because we've been doing this for about 12 years now. But this is just leading to greater things where we can tie into other things like AI, comprehensive stuff. We can make things just happen autonomously. The BAS system, which is sending real live data back into the model and into our operational tools, that can now start to drive when a maintenance needs to occur or when something needs to happen, or potentially predict that something is going to fail just based on hearing sound of the way a piece of equipment is running or something like that. So that's kind of where we are, just kind of talking about the building. But Jeff wanted me to tell you, just kind of start with this. I'm just setting Dave up. If you don't have this, it makes Dave's job harder when we go from what we're doing with our clients, which are individual buildings, or maybe universities, which are campuses. Once you get those together, then you can start getting to the larger quantity of, you know, a city or a county or something like that. So with that, Jeff.
Great. So that's our 5 trends, and very quickly. And so I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave Albert, and hopefully you can screen share. Dave and his colleague Mike on the line are in the Northern California with GeoPogo. They've exhibited their software at the Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show, as well as in the World Economic Forum in Davos. And I'll let you take it from there. Dave, you're welcome to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jeff, for setting this up. And thanks, Alan, for the lead in with the digital twins. Mike, do you want to start sharing your screen and then I'll say a couple words?
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this short. I know this meeting has run a little bit long, but in the case of the future, 3D viewing is here today. And it's fun to share something completely new. I'd like you to remember, if possible, you saw it here first today. This is something that Mike has invented. It's his brainchild. So I will let him take it away.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. All right. Hello, everybody. I just want to confirm two things. The first one, my screen is sharing and you can see GeoPogo Digital City Twins presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. And then number two, obviously my voice is coming through clear.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. I want to make sure everybody can hear. So we're going to keep this relatively short. We're going to treat this as an education session. We want to show you what is possible today, like Dave said, in terms of the technology. We're going to show you what we've built as a startup here out of Berkeley, California. And then we're going to show you an example of a municipality we're working with in Arizona who has had a digital twin of their city built and what it's done for them around urban planning and, of course, master planning for what they call their 2030 plan. So this is me. I'm Michael. I'm the creative director at GeoPogo. If you have questions after, you can scan this QR code or take my email down. And then you can shoot me emails or ask me questions about what you've seen here today. So the first question is, what are 3D digital city twins used for? Well, first and foremost, they're incredibly powerful 3D simulation tools. Municipalities across North America and Europe are starting to use them to plan out the future of their cities, especially when they're about to experience significant growth. And as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but Charlotte is one of the fastest growing cities. Is that correct?
Yes, you should move here.
I
We
heard,
only have 4% income tax.
I heard a stat that it was one of the. Well, it's fantastic, and so as the city's building, I'm sure Charlotte has a plan moving forward for the next 10 years. We're seeing municipalities coming to us that want to take those 10-year plans and they ultimately want to digitize them into a 3D simulated environment to properly showcase to the community what is the city going to transform into. The other powerful aspect is urban planning. So we are having building department teams coming to us and saying, can we use a powerful tool that allows us to import our 3D design models to master plan new communities all in situ so that we can see how different aspects and components of the city are going to work together. Architectural design. Architects are starting to use tools like these to render their projects in situ. So you can see if you're doing a tower, or there was a lot of conversation around duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes. What starts to happen with the neighborhood context as we're building these, and we're not just rendering these designs in isolation, we're showing the impact, what a whole neighborhood or community could become or look like if everything was built as per spec. Public presentations. This one's really big. We presented with the Arizona community, and they had to present back to their community new fourplex designs, which, as you may know, the community gets very afraid of change. And a lot of people have misconceptions and fears, and these are powerful tools to help dispel them, or at least get people to talk about things from a common point of view. Like, for example, line of sight may be a major issue or disruption to the existing neighborhood context. And capital projects. The town in Phoenix, or sorry, outside of Phoenix, said the same thing. They were looking at a tool like this to come up with really great renditions for capital projects for federal and state funding. And it was a way for them to differentiate from other municipalities within their county. And plenty more. I'm about to jump into the live demo. I want everybody to think of these as foundations for tools that can be built on top of each other for future. Would you say that the platforms will evolve, and just like Jeb showed, one day these things may incorporate things like artificial intelligence, where we can say, design us a new neighborhood, and perhaps the AI will be able to just spit out an entire neighborhood concept. There's lots of future potentials. So when we spoke with Jeff, we said, well, could we show Charlotte's 3D version of itself? And we can. And so I think we should just jump right into it. So we're going to do our first live demo. Now, I'd love for this to be interactive. So as I'm going through the 3D model, just ask questions. Any thoughts or comments that come to mind, just spit them out, and let's go for a spin.
Be careful what you ask for.
Interaction is the best. Okay, so this here is actually, I'm going to start. Who here remembers or knows SimCity? Raise your hand or say yes. We can build SimCity for real cities now. And it is just absolutely incredible what we can do. And so, yeah. And so you can see, here's the city of Charlotte, and it's not just the downtown, it's the entire city. It's the entire metropolitan region that is immediately available as an accessible, powerful tool for the building department, the urban planning department, and even during council meetings with the public, you can pull tools like this up, and you can now talk about with the community the aspects of what that project is going to entail. So, for example, I just, for drama and effect, I added some new skyscrapers that Charlotte may that Charlotte may have one day. And so, as we're building out these tools, we're really looking at ECUs. These aren't highly sophisticated tools, and we did that in terms of the user interface, so that almost anybody can just jump in and start using these programs and tools without specialized training. That's one of the benefits of all this new technology coming into place, is we don't have to read manuals or go to seminars. We can just start using and picking up these programs. And I'm just going to, one second. There we go. Let's see if this wants to play. Let's drop another tower there for effect. So we can drop these buildings in, and the planning departments can start to do visual presentations, not only to itself, but back to the community's communications with developers, centering around what are the effects of new buildings going to have on the community? How is this going to transform? And you can import in the full architectural models. So if the architects did a model completely in 3D, you can drop it into here in situ right on its site, and you can begin to see the transformation and effects that it's going to have. The other part we can do, and this is a really nice byproduct, is we can begin to do things like shadow studies. So I'm just going to zoom out here, and we can adjust time of day. I understand from my time in architecture how we used to do shadow studies were typically elevation drawings, or we'd attempt to model some neighborhoods in very basic ways. These models are completely accurate as to what's been scanned today. And so we can get accurate shadow studies, context studies, impact studies. And we've begun with certain municipalities integrating the ArcGIS and Esri data into the platform as well. And I'll show that in just a few minutes. So any questions that come up to mind?
Can we erase the highway?
Make it a river.
Yes. I love it. Yes. And as we're building the tool, we're looking at, just like you said, not only can we add things, but can we delete things? Can somebody come in here and say, I have an idea for Charlotte, I want to express that idea? We're working to give the tools for people to do that. for people to also participate in master planning, urban planning, and even future vision planning. Everybody can be a participant in that process. In the future as well, today this is what you can do now, but in the future, we're also going to be able to walk around the city from a 3D perspective. The technology is almost there. We utilized all this off the backbone of Google. So this is Google Maps API. And we all suspect within the next couple of years, as the program and the data updates, you'll be able to drop buildings into place and then walk around right from a first person perspective. And so all this information will continue to update, refining it better. And it's also competing with my Wi-Fi bandwidth. But we suspect in a few years, the virtual tour will be as photorealistic as the real city, of course. And then as you change things, you'll be able to see those updated and reflect here in real time. All right. Any questions? I'm going to move on just to a case study for a project that we completed. Perfect. Okay, so let's jump back. Okay, so we just completed the digital twin application for a town called Casa Grande, Arizona. They're just outside of Phoenix. And we did this with a major electric vehicle manufacturer called Lucid Motors. And so Lucid, along with many other companies, are moving in, and Casa Grande is about to transform. It's expected to double in size, and by 2030, they say, and it's about to put a great deal of pressure on existing infrastructure, public works, and of course, the residents that live there now today. So they needed a new tool to assist them in helping mitigate a lot of these new pains they're about to experience. And so this is all 3D. It's all captured from within the program, and we'll jump into it. And so this is Lucid Motors. They were very happy and proud to drop their new factory model in 3D. They had been working in Saudi Arabia as well. And one of the things they did out there was they showcased to the government there how their plant was going to open and expand a whole brand new city out there. And so that's one of the ways they signed their deals, was showcasing not only their facilities, but a new city that was going to emerge to help support it. And this is the beginning of ArcGIS data being planted in over top of the city. So one of the benefits of platforms like these, and what we're opening up, is ArcGIS is typically a very niche skill set, or it's really held by a certain group of people that can access that high level of data. And we're able to take it and plug it into these 3D environments to make the data more accessible, and more importantly, more accessible to you, and even more accessible to council. So during meetings, people can make more informed decisions. And so let's jump into Arizona. Okay, so let's see if my computer, yeah, it's playing nice. So this here is the digital twin of Casa Grande, Arizona. And council was just really excited about this. We went on about a 1-year development with them. So when we showed them, they were just so excited to have this 3D modeled representation of their city. And so for them, it's pretty much this really powerful command center that we're continuing to build and expand on. And one of the first things we did for them, just give me a second here. I'm just going to find us a nice view, is we started plugging in different data layer sets. So addresses, their city limits, their zoning layers, and then my computer is just gonna have many programs open, so don't be surprised if it fights me a little bit. Direct zoning layers on top of the community. I noticed I was listening to the first part of the presentation around all the different housing densities, and there was even a question brought up about the density map of the city. These things are completely possible to build in, to showcase density maps, future density, and then with the current zoning systems that are in place, can we foresee what the city is going to become? The different county parcels and all this information is going to load in. So we're going to come to a place where we can simulate all of this data? And then, of course, the city's general plan for 2030. So how is the city going to change and transform and grow? Phase 2 we're working on with Casa Grande is traffic simulation. So they want us to build for them a traffic simulation tool that's going to allow them to anticipate stress on major avenues, highways, and arteries. And can they have a tool that lets them predetermine as they build out neighborhoods where's the traffic jams going to be? Where's the traffic problems going to be? And so we're preparing that in phase 2 with them, along with a whole list of new data sets that help them make more informed decisions about where the city is going. But really just an incredibly powerful 3D simulated urban planning tool that's more accessible to more people to help everyone in the city make better decisions. Now, we also, let's see if this wants to play nice. During the council presentation, we showcased 2 development styles that was happening to them. And so the first one was multi-story. There was conversations about 3plexes and 4plexes. And for Casa Grande, this is very scary. Community groups are up in arms about these new styles of developments, and people are protesting. In council meetings, they're not happy about it. And so we found a new way for them to have this tool to basically showcase future developments and showcase the impacts that people fear are going to happen actually won't happen. And so we gave them these tools here. And during council meetings, let me just jump around here real quick. One thing that council really loved, especially during a real-time meeting and presentation with the community, is we can get down close and we can start to see the impacts and effects the future architectural developments are going to have on the existing community. We're going to be able to determine line of sight, which I understand is quite a universal challenge across municipalities in North America. Are people on the 2nd and 3rd floors going to be able to see into people's backyards in the neighborhoods that are already there, and vice versa? We'll be able to determine things like that without a doubt. And then most importantly, we're not talking about 2D drawings or the fears of what's going to happen from site plans. We can actually talk about what's actually going to happen to the community and the effects, all from a very logical point of view, where people can actually point at things and say, I like this or I don't like that, and here's why. And that really caught the attention of Casa Grande and their council in terms of seeing this as a powerful tool for those public presentations. So I'll leave the floor open for questions. Please let me know your thoughts and comments.
Commissioners, we got any thoughts or comments?
This Commissioner Blumenthal, I think, given the fact that we're a little bit over, if you guys wouldn't mind just making sure we have your contact information and any part of the presentation that we can review, I would imagine there will be some follow-up, but we may reserve it for directly to you instead of in this venue today.
That would be great. Yes. And Jeff and I will make sure that we get all that information. Okay, that would be great. Appreciate that demo, Mike. And that does appear to be something fun that, oh, you should come to one of our city council meetings, just saying.
Yeah, you should.
We love our city council people a lot. Are any of them in the room? Nope. Anyway, but new technology would definitely help us on with some of these things. And we greatly appreciate you guys providing us with the demo today. And thanks very much. And I think we've lost folks because we are a little bit over today. So unfortunately, that is what happened. I'm going to abbreviate the rest of our agenda for today because we are over. Normally, I'd have some comments about community engagement here, but everybody's going to get an email from me about community engagement because there's lots of things for you guys to go out and do. I have my little list here. And so I want everybody to go out and see stuff and get involved. Do I hear a motion for our meeting to close? So moved. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
That was so cool.
Thank you.
Ladies, are you gonna be?